It's the Week 11 Fantasy Running Back Preview brought to you and sponsored by the Pickett app. All right, we're going game by game by game by game, going through every single fantasy relevant running back, letting you know how I feel about them, what I do with them, what I consider them to be this year. Hopefully, giving you all some injury news and notes of offensive linemen and D linemen and things that matter that you really ain't gonna find anywhere else. All right, so we're gonna start on Thursday Night Football, where the Washington Commanders travel to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a 3-point favorite, 49.5-point total in this one. All right, so Saquon is obviously a must start. He's in your lineup every single week. You're not starting any other running backs here. Before we get into Washington, though, I do want to tell you all about Pickett, because Pickett is the single best app for like tracking your bets, or it's like a social app for it. So if you ever want to see what I am taking, right, if I'm taking player props or I'm doing straight up bets, money lines, parlays, anything like that, I have a profile on Pickett. So if you go to the link down below, it is free to download. It is free to enter in our code to let them know where y'all found the Pickett app from. It will automatically follow my account on there. So if you want to track my bets, that is where you should do so on the Pickett app. Go download that sheesh. And if you have a bunch of sports books, like if you use, DraftKings and Underdog and FanDuel and all these other ones together, you can sync them onto the app and it tracks all of them. It lets you know how you've done over like a calendar week, month, day, whatever it is. All right. It's the best sports betting tracking app in the market. Absolutely free for y'all to use. On the other side of the ball, we have a little bit of a tricky situation where Austin Eckler has filled in for Brian Robinson, who's dealing with a hamstring injury really, really well. 2 goal line touchdowns last week. So if he has that role, he is a top 20 player for sure. Philly's defense has gotten incredible over the last month of the season. You are starting to see them really dial in on that side of the ball. That being said, if Brian Robinson does not play, then you are pretty comfortably starting Austin Eckler just because of the amount of work that he gets, the carries, the catches, the goal line work. Obviously, it could be a little bit of a low floor if the goal line carries go to Jaden Daniels instead of him. You might have a disappointing day. That being said, I feel really comfortable having Eckler in my flex or my RB2 role if B-Rob misses. Now, apparently Brian Robinson is pretty optimistic about playing this week. Didn't really practice much last week, or he got a downgrade and then didn't play, and now they're on a short week. He sounds optimistic. The team sounds optimistic. I don't know if I'm ready to buy into that. If he plays, I think it's risky. I think it makes both running backs risky. Now, this is a near 50-point total, which tells me that there will be production from the backfield in one way or another. I think if Brian Robinson is active, you are probably playing him. You are probably getting a goal line carry or two. You're probably getting 15 touches out of him. He's a risky RB2, in my opinion, with the chance of re-injuring it, especially because it's coming on a short week. I think it makes Eckler almost unplayable. I think you could obviously start him in your lineup because it is a relatively big bye week. I think you could throw him in as a flex play if you're in a PPR league, because we do have Arizona, James Conner. We have Carolina, so Chuba Hubbard. We have the Giants, Tyrone Tracy. We have Tampa Bay, so Rashad White and Bucky Irving, all on bye. Those are 5 starters in the fantasy realm right now. So Eckler probably sneaks his way into a top 24, maybe even like up to 22-ish. Rankings are available on the website, bdge.co, but still risky for both of these guys, I think, if Brian Robinson does suit up. Philly has allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position overall, and they're just getting better as the year has progressed. Let's move over to Detroit and Jacksonville, and this is insane, this line. Detroit is a 13.5-point favorite, 47.5-point total. You're obviously starting Jahmyr Gibbs. You're starting David Montgomery. On the flip side of things, we got to keep an eye on the injury report. Obviously, it is Wednesday. I'm filming this around noon, so we don't have a ton of practice reports out yet for the teams that are not on short weeks. So we don't know about Tank Bigsby's ankle injury, which he suffered last week. I will say, if Tank Bigsby is out, that really condenses the offense and the backfield in general to ETN. And I think ETN, despite how bad he has been, and in a matchup against Detroit, this is really tough. I don't expect a lot of ground production, but they're 13.5-point dogs. I think if Bigsby misses this game, it does make ETN like a decent play in PPR leagues because he'll probably catch a ton of passes. He will get a ton of work. I even think this might make Dearness Johnson semi-viable in PPR leagues if you're really, really desperate, because they'll be in catch-up mode. And Johnson, ETN is more equipped to be a 3-down workhorse than Tank Bigsby is. So I actually think it makes it more valuable to have one person in his backfield that is ETN instead of Tank Bigsby. But with that being said, I still think they probably want to use 2 running backs in this backfield, and Dearness Johnson has obviously been the other guy in the pass catching role. So if Tank doesn't play, ETN, he's definitely a top 20 option for me. I think he'll get there via PPR. If Tank does play, I don't know that I want anyone in this backfield. It is messy. This team does not move the ball with Mac Jones under center. They've already ruled out Trevor Lawrence for this game. We don't know who's going to get the goal line carries. We don't know if they're going to have any success against this like stout Detroit Lions run defense. So I'm kind of off them if Tank does end up playing, but keep an eye on practice reports. I would play ETN if Tank is out. Moving down the list, we got Green Bay as 6.5-point favorites on the road against Chicago, 41.5-point total. Now, there are some weather concerns for this game, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. They've kind of been shifted from the beginning of the week. They're a little bit less severe now, but I still think we'll see some weather that could affect the passing game a little bit in this one. That being said, though, you're starting Jacobs as a top 15 option, probably even better than that because of the number of guys on a bye this week. And Chicago's run defense has not been anywhere near as good as their pass defense. So we welcome that matchup with open arms here. On the flip side, Swift is a tough one because he's gotten so much work. He looked really good in great matchups. And now Chicago starts to get matchups that are a little less easy. Green Bay is not, elite against the run by any means, but EPA per rush, they are the number 8 team in the NFL right now. They're coming off their bye, so they should be healthier. And the bigger problem is Chicago's offensive line was down 3 starters last game and then lost a 4th in the middle of the game. So that is another one where we're going to need to keep an eye on the practice reports in Chicago. We have no data so far from the Week 11 practice reports because they haven't come out yet. But again, free resource for you guys to stay on top of the practice reports, rotowire.com/football/practice report, whatever. Just type in on Google, like Bears practice report Week 11 RotoWire, and you'll be able to see who's DNP, who's limited. If they're down without all their defensive, or if they're going into this game without all of their offensive linemen, I think you still probably have to start Swift, but he's definitely a little bit riskier, and you're not playing him in like DFS lineups, etc. Moving down to the Rams and the Patriots, obviously you are starting Kyron Williams. They are 4.5-point favorites on the road in New England, 43.5-point total. New England run defense is terrible. They're 25th in PFF run grade. They've allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Kyron, obviously a monster, has not scored in 2 out of the last 3 weeks, but he's probably due for like a 2 or 3 touchdown game incoming. Now, on the Patriots side of the ball, obviously the only one you're considering is Ramondre Stevenson. He continues to get it done for fantasy because he's getting a lot of goal line work, and obviously this offense runs a lot smoother when Drake May is under center. And I think the Rams defense, they've been good. Obviously, like their defensive line has just been so massively improved through the draft with Verse and Brandon Fisk. But I still think this is an offense that could do some damage against a Rams secondary that can be had here. So I think Drake May moves the ball. I think Ramondre gets a lot of work again. So he's a solid, like, mid to low end RB2 this week. Moving now, we got Cleveland and New Orleans. Cleveland is in New Orleans, 1.5-point underdog. So the Saints are favored, 46.5-point total. This total feels way too high for me. That's a bet that I will probably take. And again, if you want to track that, if you want to know what I take prior to Sunday, go download the Pickett app, use our code BDGE in the little code spot. You don't have to purchase anything, no credit card required, but it'll automatically have you follow my profile on there. I think this under is one that I'm going to take here. New Orleans, of course, you're starting Alvin Kamara. You're not starting any other running back there. Cleveland, a lot of people are getting excited about Nick Chubb for this week, and I don't blame them. When you look at the stats for the New Orleans Saints run defense, they are so bad. Their PFF run grade is dead last. Their EPA per rush rank is second to last, 4th most fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position. I will say Jerome Ford did make his return last week, and we saw Jerome Ford get 45% of the snaps to Nick Chubb's 36%. With Nick Chubb, I don't know how much like upside there really is on a game-by-game basis. Like, I don't think he's really going to be breaking away runs. I think you probably need a good game script in order for him to like get the volume enough where it's fantasy relevant. Like, he's put up 4, I think, and 5 PPR fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. He had a 10-point game a few weeks ago because he scored on the goal line, and I think that's really where his good game lies, is he can be kind of like what Kareem Hunt is in Kansas City. And we were just talking about this on a podcast where, like, Kareem Hunt's obviously his role and his fantasy production has been incredible. It's not because he's making huge plays. It's because he's just in on every single goal line carry. And I think that's probably what Nick Chubb is going to be. Cleveland just continues to score from so far out. Like, Jameis continues to throw, 15, 30-yard touchdowns, and that's how their scoring is coming, or they're just not scoring at all. When they get down to the 1-yard line, and it's impossible to predict that, it will be Chubb carry. So there might be a game or two, this one included, where Chubb gets 2 touchdowns. Like, he might carry the ball 14 times for 50 yards and 2 rushing scores. But if he doesn't get that, he has the floor of what we've seen the last couple of weeks. So I know everyone's like super high on Chubb coming off the bye. I think he's going to be like super healthy. I just don't think this, 10-day period is going to be the thing that automatically like fixes his absolutely shredded knee. So color me a little bit skeptical there. I think he is extremely startable this week because of the matchup. But I think there are a lot of players I still would start over him. And I think the fact that Jerome Ford is back is going a little bit underplayed right now for the amount of play time that Jerome Ford did get. And you remember how much they liked Jerome Ford coming into the season and how much work they gave him. I think they completely plan on this being a committee backfield here. So again, Chubb very startable, Ford not, but I would hesitate on very high expectations. Moving now, we got Minnesota in Tennessee. Minnesota is 6.5-point favorites. This is a 39.5-point total. This is one where they do not expect a lot of points to be scored here. Minnesota are obviously starting Aaron Jones. I know there was a scare last week. I saw a clip of Aaron Jones talking about him being carted off. He has like a chest rib injury, which he'll be able to just get a blocker and play through it. I fully expect him to play this week and not really be hampered by it at all. Got on a cart, he said, because the x-ray machine was all the way on the other side of the stadium in the corner, and he was just like, I was too lazy to walk there. So that wasn't anything that's actually worrisome as an Aaron Jones owner. You're obviously not starting anyone behind Aaron Jones. You're starting Aaron Jones. On the flip side, Minnesota's been one of, if not the best run defense in the NFL. They still rank about top 3-ish in every category. PFF run grade, EPA per rush. They are single top dog, number one, fourth fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position. For Tennessee, Tony Pollard's coming off like his first like down game. I've heard a lot of like carries and snap counts being thrown out, but Tony Pollard also left this game or sat on the sideline for a while because he was a little bit banged up. Now, I think Tony Pollard's kind of proven himself this year to be good enough to be able to take a game off or not give you 20 fantasy points and still have him in your lineup. So a lot of people are panicking on him, which I don't think is the right thing to do. He might have a down game in this one against Minnesota, but their schedule gets really good for the ground game. So I'm still confident in Tony Pollard. I think he's a rock-solid RB2 in this matchup. Tajay can't get into your lineup really until we see something more, until we see him catch 3-4 passes in a game, until we see him like really get closer to Tony Pollard's workload where, you know, they keep talking about how they want to spread the workload out a little bit more, and I'm sure it will be a little bit more condensed. I think going into the year they did want this to be a 60-40 split, but Tajay's obviously been banged up, but Pollard's been good enough to be like, we don't fucking need that. I'll give you all the production that we need in one single backfield. So you start Pollard again. Don't worry about last week. Don't worry about all the sell high fucking propaganda out there on Tony Pollard. And then Tajay's a hold. Indy, New York. Now, we just had some news come down the breadbasket here. Indy is 3.5-point underdogs on the road in New York. 43.5-point total. Let me see if there's been an update to the spread. That was prior to Anthony Richardson being announced to start. I like yesterday, it was like Joe Flacco was the starter. He's the starter for the remainder of the season. Today, Anthony Richardson is the starter. Now he's the starter for the remainder of the season. That being said, the spread did not change whatsoever. It is still a 43.5-point total, 3.5-point underdogs for Indianapolis. This one feels like another total that feels a little bit high, 43.5 points. I know the Jets run defense is awful. What does this do for the running backs? You're obviously starting Breece Hall. It's a great matchup. Like, is this dude ever going to get back into the end zone? I don't know, but you have to start him, of course. On the flip side, JT, I think you're getting way too cute if you're trying to figure out what, you know, the quarterback change means for JT. He's a high-end RB1 every single time he's in the lineup. So tomorrow's video, when we go into the wide receiver game-by-game recap, that's something that we need to look a little bit deeper into in terms of, you know, what does the quarterback change mean for a Josh Downs, an Alec Pierce, a Michael Pittman, an Adonai Mitchell. But in this type of video, you know, we're not wasting time talking about fucking JT because of the quarterback switches. Next up, we got Vegas in Miami. Miami is 7-point favorites at home, 44.5-point total. Vegas is just a shit show right now. They just swapped out all of their offensive play callers and OC, and they have a whole new coaching staff coming out of the bye, and we don't know who the quarterback is. Like, it was Minshew, then he got benched for Desmond Ridder. Like, are they really going to play fucking Ridder coming out of the bye? That would be devastating for this offense. It's already a devastating offense, but if they put Ridder under center, as a Falcons fan, I think I might have been the only person in the entire sports media industry that said it wasn't Arthur Smith last year. This is on record. Arthur Smith, comeback. They don't have a comeback coach of the year or a comeback offensive coordinator of the year award, but if they did, it'd be his fucking ass. It was not Smith. It was never Arthur. Hated him with his smug ass fucking mustache, but his play calling was good. Ridder cannot run a fucking offense though, which is going to cause problem for this running back group. Madison's been obviously the single best fantasy option they have, and it hasn't been close, but he's coming off of his worst game of the year, 3.6 PPR fantasy points, 39% of the snaps. Zamir White, 12% of the snaps. Amir Abdullah, 49% of the snaps. Obviously, the game script went in favor of Amir, but they talked a lot about wanting to get Zamir White more involved last week. He ended up getting a touchdown carry, so it's really messy out there in that backfield. Madison, I think, is startable if you're really in a pinch and you are really desperate, but he's somewhere in that like RB3 range that has a super, super low floor. Miami, you're obviously starting Devon Achane. I don't think you can start Raheem Mostert after his 0-carry game on Monday night. We had Jalen Wright out-carry him. I think it was 5-0. Raheem Mostert did still play a handful of snaps. He was still the third down back. The touches just did not go in his way. That being said, though, this is clear as day. It's Achane, and then you're not starting anyone else in that backfield. I would hold Jalen Wright, though. I would probably hold Raheem Mostert, too. It's just those both are kind of guys that you need the other guy to get hurt for, or Achane to get hurt for either of them to be relevant. We got Baltimore-Pittsburgh. Baltimore -3.5 on the road in Pittsburgh. 47.5 point over under in this one. Both run defenses are really good. That doesn't really do anything to Derrick Henry. You are obviously starting him. You're not starting Keaton Mitchell or Justice Hill, but I am intrigued to see if Keaton Mitchell starts to get more and more work as the season progresses here. Justice Hill's been really good for them, so who knows? On the Pittsburgh side of things, Najee tweaked his ankle in this previous game. Mike Tomlin sounded optimistic about him playing in the upcoming game against Baltimore, so I guess I'll take his word for it. If that's the case, you're going to start Najee Harris, even in a tough matchup, as probably a low-end RB2, but this is a very high total, so they're expecting both teams to be able to move the ball. Obviously, the pass defenses for Baltimore in particular, and just how well Russell Wilson is playing, lends itself to being able to keep pace with Baltimore here. So Najee could get some goal line opportunities. Obviously been running super fucking pure over the last month of the season. Jaylen Warren, much more involved last week. Him and Najee both had 46% of the snaps last week. So this was the dude they obviously really wanted to use in the lineup coming into the year, but then he's just dealt with injuries and hasn't played well. Now we might be seeing a little bit more of that like split backfield that we expected, but Najee should still get 15 plus carries, still the goal line work. This isn't necessarily a defense that allows just like pass catching backs to really dominate, though we just saw Chase Brown catch 9 passes, so maybe I'm just yapping to yap. I think Warren is still a pretty scary flex play in my opinion for this week. If Najee does miss this game, they sound optimistic again, but if it does happen, then I feel good about Jaylen Warren. And then Cordarrelle Patterson is maybe a little bit sexy flexy. Maybe you can get cute there. I think you could do worse than Cordarrelle is what I'll say, because he's actually been kind of good on limited touches when he does play. Seattle, San Francisco, you are obviously playing Kenneth Walker, and you are obviously playing Christian McCaffrey. 6.5 point favorites for San Fran at home, 49.5 point total, clear as day. Atlanta, Denver. Denver's 1.5 point favorites at home, 43.5 point total. Denver's defense has obviously been tremendous this year. Bijan Robinson, I would argue, has been better. Bijan's obviously in your lineup. You're not starting Tyler Algier. Last week was a spot that we said that, like, okay, this was one of like 2 or 3 games where we felt okay about starting Tyler Algier. He played well. He got stuffed on the 1-yard line 3 carries in a row. Then Bijan came in and scored the goal line touchdown. So that is not great for Tyler Algier ever getting goal line work again there. So start Bijan. You're sitting Tyler Algier. For Denver, this is kind of like the $1 million question this week. I feel comfortable saying Audric Estime will get a very healthy workload. And Atlanta's run defense has been whatever, subpar. It's not a matchup that you need to stay away from. Julian McLaughlin will run some passing down work, obviously. We've seen, like, Estime is not a pass-catching back. It's not what his specialty is whatsoever. That was not what he did at Notre Dame. He's a thumper. He's a dude that, like, imposes his will on the defense. This offense overall for Denver has played way better than anyone expected them coming into the year with Bo Nix, meaning there will be goal line opportunities, meaning Estime will probably get those goal line opportunities. I also think this is a defense that doesn't necessarily only pass to its pass-catching backs. They throw the ball to the running backs on 1st and 2nd down. So I think there's a world where Estime, despite being a bad pass catcher or not a positive in that game, can still catch like 1, 2, 3 passes a game just by being the early down back there. And that's big for PPR. That's like a big floor play. So I actually think Estime is a pretty solid start this week. I'm going to ride the hot hand here. I'm going to believe the narrative that Javonte is on his contract year, that they just want to see what they have in Estime, and they're going to let him ride out. I don't think Javonte will be a healthy scratch, although it's probably a hot take, but it wouldn't like overly surprise me. If they're just not going to use him, that wouldn't shock me. But Estime has been dealing with his own injury, so maybe they just want to have a backup plan there in place. But I like Estime as a flex play this week. Kansas City, Buffalo, we got KC on the road. Buffalo 1.5 point favorites at home, 45.5 point total. James Cook, you're obviously playing when this running game is getting going. They are gone, brother, and they don't have a lot of their pass catching weapons at their disposal because of the injuries here. Kansas City obviously an incredible run defense, but like James Cook, you're not going to sit him. On the flip side, you're obviously not sitting Kareem Hunt either. Moving to Cincinnati and the Los Angeles Chargers. We got the Chargers at home, 1.5 point favorites, 46.5 point total in this one. Of course, you're starting Chase Brown for the Chargers. This gets a little bit tricky. We had Gus Edwards make his return, get 10 carries. Only 25% of the snaps there. Dobbins was still hovering around the 70% snap mark, but his rush attempt percentage, the rate, 45%, which was his lowest since week 2. He still ran 70% of the routes there. So his role, the biggest change here is obviously the early down change. Now, I don't think it's that dramatic for fantasy because if he gives 5-6 carries, like he was giving 5-6 carries to Kamani Vidal, if he gives 5-6 away to Gus Edwards now, Gus is going to turn those 5 carries into, 20 yards or something. So if J.K. Dobbins was still breaking off huge plays, I would say that might be a significant chunk of the workload. Now, I'm not trying to spin this. Like, there's no way this is a positive for Dobbins, obviously. But we also saw Gus Edwards play for the first month of the season, and he was terrible. And then they just started to phase him out of the offense. Maybe it was injury related, and that's why he wasn't playing well. But Gus, I still feel very, very, very skeptical about. I think it's a good matchup against Cincinnati. I think you can play Dobbins as an RB2. I think Gus, you have to be pretty desperate. Like, he'll need to have a goal line carry, which he could be the goal line back. Now, I don't know how this offense is going to play itself out there, but it's a pretty big total, 46.5 points. Herbert's playing really well. The offense is playing really well, so they could find themselves on the goal line. Could do worse than Gus Edwards. I'm just saying I'm still a little bit skeptical about him. And the last game of the slate, Monday Night Football, that Cincinnati-LA game was Sunday Night Football. Monday Night Football, Houston travels to Dallas. An awful game for Monday Night Football without Dak Prescott, obviously. Houston, 7.5-point favorites. On the road, 42.5-point total. Of course, you're starting Joe Mixon. On the other side of the ball, you have Rico Dowdle, who is getting the work, and he's been one of the lone bright spots for this offense. But I just... how could you have possibly watched that game, Dallas versus Philly last week, and have any confidence in any single fantasy player on the Dallas side of things? So I think they're going to try to establish the run against Houston, and they're going to give Rico Dowdle enough touches. You can probably start him and feel okay with him based on, again, 5 or 6 really usable fantasy players being on bye this week. But I wouldn't have expectations for him anything higher than the running back 23 to 26 range in that opinion. So if you have better options at the wide receiver position in full PPR leagues, I would definitely be looking in that direction over Rico. And that is the last game of the slate. I've realized we're playing in the Dallas Cowboys fucking stadium right now with the sun kind of shining through and I can't see fucking anything out of my eyes anymore. You done? But we're going to leave you there. All right. So again, if you enjoyed the video, if you want to support the brand, the best way to do that is by going to download the Pickett app, absolutely free. Throw in BDGE in the promo code spot, also free to do. It'll follow my account automatically. You could see what bets I take, and you could also track your own sportsbooks activities on that app. All right. Hit the button that looks like this if you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back tomorrow with the wide receiver version of this video. So make sure you subscribe. Love you. Smoochies.